Welcome to part 2 of this guide on peach and nectarine fertilization. In the first part, we focused on the foundations of orchard nutrition, starting with the general fertilization philosophy, and then detailing the management of the three major nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. We saw how proper N, P-K management is essential to control tree vigor, sustain yield, and build the nutritional base for good fruit production. In this second part, we move one step further and focus on fruit quality and nutritional fine-tuning. We will discuss practical strategies for calcium fertilization, its critical role in fruit firmness and post-harvest performance, followed by magnesium management and its interaction with potassium. We will also cover micronutrient fertilization, including zinc, boron, and iron, and finish with a real case study from Morocco, showing how these principles are applied under field conditions. This part is especially important for growers who want to improve fruit quality, consistency, and long-term orchard performance. After discussing potassium, because of its major role in fruit size, sugars, and yield, we now move to a nutrient that is often misunderstood but absolutely critical for fruit quality, calcium. Unlike nitrogen or potassium, calcium does not mainly affect yield, but it has a strong impact on fruit firmness, storage life, and resistance to physiological disorders. And even in calcareous soils where calcium is abundant, fruit calcium levels can still be low due to limited mobility inside the tree. So in the next section, we'll focus on practical calcium management, why calcium-related problems occur, and how to improve calcium delivery to the fruit.
All right, let's dive into something that can be a real headache for any peach and nectarine grower, the calcium conundrum. We're going to talk about why this nutrient is so critical for top-notch fruit, but more importantly, why having tons of it in your soil, well, that doesn't mean you're in the clear, not even close. So you know the feeling, right? You're out in the orchard, the trees look amazing, the fruit is sizing up, everything looks perfect. But then, after you pick it, it all goes wrong. The fruit gets soft way too fast, it just doesn't hold up in storage, and the shelf life is, honestly, it's a huge letdown. It's a super common problem that has a lot of growers scratching their heads.
Okay, to really crack this case, we first have to get a handle on why calcium is such a superstar for your fruit. I mean, it's not just another nutrient on the list, it's literally the foundation for quality. You see, calcium's job is all about structure. It's like the mortar between the bricks of the fruit's cell walls. Stronger walls mean firmer fruit, simple as that. It leads to better overall quality, a much longer shelf life, and it even helps prevent those costly cracking problems while supporting the whole root system.
So why is calcium such a big deal? Well, just look at its job description. Think of it like the mortar holding bricks together. Calcium is the stuff that builds strong cell walls in the fruit. And what do strong cell walls give you? Firmer fruit. It's that simple. Better firmness means better shelf life and a much lower risk of cracking. It is a direct line from this nutrient to the quality you can see and feel.
Now here's the really tricky part. Unlike a lot of other nutrient issues, you're not going to see yellowing leaves or any obvious signs on the tree. Nope. The proof of a calcium problem shows up right when it matters most, in the harvest bin. You can literally feel it, that lack of firmness, that poor storage potential. The problem stays hidden until it's almost too late.
And let's be real, this is way more than just a small annoyance. When your fruit doesn't have good firmness, you're looking at serious financial consequences. We're talking shorter shelf life, terrible performance in storage, and fruit that's way more likely to crack. It all adds up to one thing: fruit you can't sell and money right out of your pocket. This hits your bottom line hard. Okay, so whenever we talk about fruit firmness, the first thing that comes up is calcium. And that's where we run smack into the great calcium myth. You know, the idea that if your soil test says you have plenty of calcium, your fruit should be just fine. But as you're about to see, it's just not that simple. This slide really lays out the whole paradox. On one hand, you do a soil test, especially in those calcareous soils a lot of us have, and it shows there's plenty of calcium. The ground is loaded with it. But then you test the fruit itself, and what do you find? It's often low in calcium. So what gives? Where's the disconnect here? And boom, this quote just nails it. The problem isn't about the supply of calcium that's available in the ground. The problem is all about delivery. The tree is literally struggling to get that calcium from the soil and transport it all the way into the fruit where it's needed most. So, how in the world do we crack this delivery code? Well, to figure out the solution, we've got to understand the system. And that brings us to what I call the transpiration highway.
And here it is. This is the solution to the paradox. The big reveal. The problem isn't how much calcium is in the soil. It's all about its incredibly difficult, kind of lazy journey into the fruit. It's a mobility problem.
Now, to really get this delivery problem, we need to talk about a process called transpiration. It sounds scientific, but it's really simple. It's just how the tree moves water from the roots all the way up to the leaves. And calcium, it's lazy. It doesn't move on its own, it just hitches a ride on this water highway, traveling up through the tree's plumbing, which is called the xylem. So how does this water highway lead to our problem? Well, that brings us to section 3, explaining why that calcium-rich soil doesn't automatically mean you get calcium-rich fruit. It's all because of something we'll call the transpiration gap. And this is the perfect way to picture the problem. Think of that water flow as a massive highway. The leaves, they're like a giant city. They're transpiring like crazy, so they have these huge 8-lane off-ramps getting a constant fire hose of water and calcium. But the fruit is like a tiny little town on a forgotten side road. It barely transpires at all, so it gets very little traffic. And that means it gets starved of calcium. Just look at this comparison. This explains everything in a nutshell. Your leaves, they have a huge surface area, and they are constantly breathing out water vapor. They have a massive demand for water. That means they're pulling tons of water and all the calcium that comes with it right to them. But the fruit, it barely transpires at all. So on the very same branch, the leaves can be loaded with calcium while the fruit right next to them is deficient.
And this right here shows the whole problem in a nutshell. Step 1, calcium gets into the roots, no problem. Step 2, it starts its journey up the tree with the water, but then, step 3, the leaves, which are transpiration powerhouses, act like giant magnets. They suck up almost all the calcium, leaving the poor fruit, which doesn't transpire much, completely starved.
So what causes traffic jams and shutdowns on this calcium highway? Well, first up, any kind of water stress from irregular irrigation messes up the whole flow. Second, too much nitrogen. That just grows more leaves, which is like building more giant cities that steal all the resources. And finally, high levels of potassium or magnesium in the soil, they actually compete with calcium, kind of elbowing it out of the way before it can even get into the tree. Okay, so we've got the problem figured out. We understand the science behind it. Now for the good part. Let's build a master plan. It's time to open up the solution toolkit that every single grower needs to have.
Phew! Okay, so now we get the problem, right? We understand it inside and out. So what in the world do we actually do about it? Let's switch gears and get practical. It's time to look at the tools in our toolbox, targeted application methods.
Now, you've got a few ways to get calcium to your trees. But believe me, for this specific problem, they are not all created equal. Applying it to the soil, great for soil structure, but it doesn't solve that delivery problem inside the tree. Fertigation, it gets calcium to the roots, sure, but it often brings along nitrogen you don't want, and it's not a great choice for calcareous soils anyway. Which brings us to foliar sprays. They completely bypass the problem by putting calcium directly on the fruit. It is by far the most practical tool for getting better firmness. And this is really the key takeaway. If we want to get past the tree's flawed delivery system, we have to bypass it completely. We need to put the calcium directly onto our target, the fruit. For improving firmness, quality, and storage life, a foliar spray is hands down the most direct and practical way to get the job done. You're putting it right where it needs to go. So what's a good foliar program look like in practice? It's all about consistency. You got to start early, right after the fruit sets. Then you just keep at it, repeating sprays every 10 to 14 days. You're going to be aiming for a total of 4 to 8 sprays over the season. And of course, choose the right product. Calcium nitrate is a great choice. It's pretty gentle. Calcium chloride works too, you just have to be a little more careful to avoid burning the leaves. Now, foliar sprays are an incredibly powerful tool, but they don't work in a vacuum. To really get the best results, you need to think bigger. You need a holistic approach. So let's put all the pieces together into your final orchard action plan. But listen, sprays aren't some magic bullet that work in a bubble. For them to really work, you have to combine them with smart orchard management. That means keeping your irrigation stable and consistent, keep that highway open, avoid going crazy with nitrogen and potassium because they're just going to compete, manage your tree vigor with good, solid pruning, and always, always remember this philosophy. Many small, consistent sprays are way better than 1 or 2 huge ones. Okay, so this brings us to the final big picture takeaway. All of this information really requires us to make a fundamental shift in how we think about calcium for our peach and nectarine trees. I really want this quote to sink in because it's so important. Look, with a lot of other nutrients, you're putting them on to push for more yield or bigger fruit. Calcium is different. In these trees, calcium is all about quality. It's what gives you firmness, storage potential, and that post-harvest life. That is calcium's job. So if you remember one thing, let it be this. When your goal is to get firmer fruit, to make it last longer on the shelf, and to make sure your harvest gets to the market looking fantastic, calcium is the #1 nutrient you need to be thinking about. It is, hands down, the ultimate quality nutrient. And that really leaves us with one last question for you to think about in your own operation. Take an honest look at your fertilization program and ask yourself, are you just fertilizing for size? Are you really truly fertilizing for quality? Because getting your calcium strategy right, well, that can make all the difference.
After discussing calcium and its critical role in fruit firmness, storage potential, and resistance to physiological disorders, we now turn to another secondary nutrient that is often overlooked but essential for tree balance: magnesium. Magnesium plays a central role in photosynthesis, energy transfer, and carbohydrate production, and its availability directly affects leaf function and overall tree efficiency. However, magnesium deficiencies are frequently induced by high potassium or calcium levels rather than by low soil magnesium itself. In this section, we'll focus on when magnesium fertilization is truly necessary, how to diagnose deficiencies correctly, and how to manage magnesium nutrition without creating nutrient imbalances in peach and nectarine orchards.
Hello and welcome. You know, if you're serious about growing peaches and nectarines, there are a few things you just have to get right. And today we're going to zero in on one that's absolutely crucial: magnesium. We're going to break down how to spot a problem, figure out what's causing it, and then lay out a really practical strategy to get your trees healthy and productive.
So here's how we're going to solve this mystery. First, we're going to identify our hero nutrient. Then we'll learn how to spot the warning signs, the clues. After that, we'll dig down to the root of the problem, figure out the right treatment, and finally, wrap it all up with a practical action plan you can actually use.
Okay, our investigation kicks off with the unsung hero of the orchard, magnesium. Now, it might not get all the fame and glory that nitrogen or potassium do, but I'm telling you, without it, the whole system just starts to fall apart. It is the absolute powerhouse that keeps those leaves green and your fruit sweet.
So what does magnesium actually do?
Well, it's got 3 really critical jobs. Job number 1, it's at the very heart of chlorophyll. That's the green stuff, the engine of photosynthesis. Job 2, it's like a tiny little delivery truck, transporting sugars and energy where the tree needs them most. And job 3, it keeps those leaf factories humming along at full steam while the fruit is sizing up. The big takeaway here: healthy leaves equal high-quality fruit. It's that simple.
All right, let's move on to the next step of our investigation: learning to read the clues. Your trees are telling you exactly what's wrong. You just need to know their language.
Okay, the #1 symptom you need to look for is something called interveinal chlorosis. It's a fancy term, but all it means is the area between the veins of the leaf turns yellow while the veins themselves stay green. It can create this really distinct V shape or even a Christmas tree pattern. And here's the key: you'll see this on the older, lower leaves first. If things get really bad, you might see some orange or red colors, and eventually the leaves will just drop off way too early. And that, of course, hurts the tree's ability to produce that amazing fruit we're all after.
And the problem doesn't stop with a little yellowing. If things get worse, that yellow can turn into an orange or even a reddish color later in the season. You'll probably see those affected older leaves just give up and drop off way before they should. And all of this, of course, leads to weaker growth, and ultimately, it hits you where it hurts: smaller fruit with less sugar.
And this right here, this is why all of that leaf stuff really matters. A weakened tree just can't give you a great harvest. A magnesium deficiency can lead to stunted growth, smaller fruit, and, this is a big one, less sugar in the peaches or nectarines. Those leaves are the first warning sign of a much bigger problem that hits you right in the harvest.
All right, so we've identified the symptoms. We know what is happening. Now for the real detective work. Why is the tree running low on magnesium? To find the real culprit, we've got to look below the surface.
And right away, we find our prime suspect. I mean, look at this. Sure, sandy soils can be a problem, high calcium soils can play a part, but look at that huge slice of the pie. A whopping 60% of the time, the problem isn't a lack of magnesium in the soil at all. It's an excess of potassium.
I mean, this is the real question, isn't it? Is it as simple as not having enough magnesium in the ground, or is something else at play? Well, more often than not, the story is a bit more complicated.
This whole thing is called potassium-magnesium antagonism. The easiest way to think about it is this. Imagine the tree's roots have little doorways for nutrients to get in. If you flood the area with a ton of potassium, it just muscles its way in and crowds all the doorways, blocking magnesium from getting absorbed. It's really no surprise that a lot of magnesium issues pop up right after a grower has applied a heavy potassium fertilizer.
Now, of course, the potassium bully isn't the only possible cause. If you've got sandy soils, they're like a sieve. They just don't hold on to nutrients well, and magnesium can wash right through. Really high calcium soils can cause a similar crowding out problem. And honestly, any kind of major stress on the tree, like high salt levels or drought, can make it harder for it to absorb any nutrients properly. So here's the big takeaway, the thing you really need to file away. If you've recently been pushing your trees with a heavy potassium program, to try and bulk up that fruit size, and now suddenly you're seeing these yellow leaves, it is probably not a coincidence. You may have accidentally caused this problem yourself.
So, you've seen the symptoms on the leaves, you've got a prime suspect in your fertilizer program, but how do you know for sure? How do you confirm it? Well, the good news is you don't have to guess. There's a definitive, scientific way to get your answer. The gold standard here is a leaf analysis, but listen, you've got to do it right, otherwise the results won't be accurate. You'll want to collect your samples around midsummer. Make sure you're grabbing leaves that are fully grown, and take them specifically from the new shoots that grew this season. Following these steps is key to getting a true snapshot of what's happening inside that tree.
Okay, so you get your lab results back, and the numbers are going to tell you the whole story. A healthy, happy tree is going to have a magnesium level somewhere between 0.20 and 0.40%. The critical number you're really watching for is that bottom one. Anything below 0.20% is a huge red flag. That's deficiency.
Let's just put that number front and center, 0.20%. That's your line in the sand. If your test results dip below this number, you have officially diagnosed a magnesium deficiency. It's the hard data that confirms what your eyes were telling you.
And this is where it all clicks. You've got the yellowing leaves, the lab result comes back under 0.20%, and suddenly it's pretty clear that this whole potassium-magnesium fight is the real root of the problem, especially if you know you've been fertilizing with a lot of potassium. Case closed.
Okay, so we know the problem, and we've got our most likely cause. So, how do we fix it? Well, it's time to choose our treatment. But I've got to tell you, this is definitely not a one-size-fits-all kind of solution.
So we've basically got three main options. We can apply magnesium directly to the soil as a granular fertilizer. We can inject it into our drip lines, which we call fertigation. Or for a really fast-acting fix, we can spray it directly onto the leaves themselves. Now this is probably the most important slide of the whole explainer, because your best strategy depends completely on your soil. If you have neutral or acidic soils, great. Applying it to the soil or through fertigation works beautifully. But, and this is a big but, if you're on alkaline, high calcium soils, don't even bother with those methods. The high pH and all that calcium will just lock up the magnesium and your tree will never see it. In that case, a foliar spray is your best and really your only effective option because you're bypassing the soil problem completely.
So for soil, you've got two key options. First, there's magnesium sulfate, which works pretty quickly. Then you have something called dolomite. Now, this one is special. It doesn't just provide magnesium, it also contains calcium carbonate, which helps raise the pH of acidic soils, so it's like a fantastic two-in-one treatment. And here they are again, our two main players for soil health, magnesium sulfate and dolomite. You don't need to memorize the chemical formulas or anything, but it's helpful to remember that it's dolomite's unique composition that makes it so great at fixing that acid problem we just talked about.
Now, let's move on to our next option. Instead of just putting fertilizer in the soil and waiting for it to dissolve, what if you could deliver it directly with the water? Well, this super efficient method has a pretty cool name, fertigation.
And would you look at that? Magnesium sulfate is back on the list. It's just so versatile, it can be used in these fertigation systems too. Another option, if you can get your hands on it, is magnesium nitrate. Both dissolve really well in water, making them perfect for this method.
But what if your peach tree is in trouble and needs up, like right now? That's where our third method comes in. For the fastest possible response, you can actually bypass the roots entirely and give the plant a quick boost right through its leaves. This is called foliar correction.
Before we see how that works, it's worth pointing this out. Across all three methods we've talked about, soil, water, and now leaves, one product shows up every single time. Magnesium sulfate is truly the undisputed MVP of magnesium delivery.
Okay, we've explored the entire menu of options. We've seen the traditional way, the efficient way, and the emergency method. Now, let's bring it all together to help you decide which one is right for your plant right now.
This summary table really helps connect the dots. For a long-term, foundational soil health, soil application is your best bet. If you value efficiency and getting nutrients straight to the roots, choose fertigation. And if your plant is showing signs of distress and you need the absolute fastest response, foliar correction is the way to go. And that, catch, is your soil. This is without a doubt the single most important factor in this entire decision. If you pick the wrong treatment for your soil type, it's not just going to be ineffective, it's a complete and total waste of your time and money.
So here is the critical breakdown. If your soil is neutral to acidic, you're in good shape. Applying magnesium to the soil or through fertigation works great because the roots can actually pick it up. But, and listen closely here, if you've got alkaline, high pH soil, those methods are pretty much useless. The high levels of calcium in that soil will just lock up any magnesium you add. In that situation, a foliar spray is your best and really your only effective weapon because you're bypassing the soil completely and getting the nutrient right where it needs to go.
All right, let's pull all this information together into a clear, simple action plan. We've gone from the symptom to the cause to the solution. Now let's talk real numbers and strategy.
So if you see those yellow leaves, and especially if you know you have that tricky alkaline soil, a foliar spray is your go-to emergency response. It's a first aid kit for your tree. The process is really straightforward. Use magnesium sulfate, apply 2 to 4 sprays, and space them out about 10 to 14 days apart. This will bring that green color back fast and get photosynthesis humming again. Just remember, this is a quick fix, a band-aid, not a long-term cure for the underlying problem in the soil.
Now, for commercial growers who have a confirmed deficiency and the right kind of soil, a typical correction rate is somewhere between 40 to 80 kilograms of magnesium oxide per hectare per year. If you're a home gardener, the key is just to follow the application rates on a good magnesium fertilizer product. And remember, this is only for fixing a diagnosed problem, not for just routine feeding.
And just a quick pro tip for when you're doing your calculations. A lot of fertilizer bags list the analysis as the oxide form, MgO. To figure out how much actual elemental magnesium you're putting down, just remember this simple rule. 1 kilogram of MgO gives you about 0.6 kilograms of Mg. Easy. Okay, so choosing the right method is all about strategy. Let's break down the key takeaways. And believe it or not, the first step is actually about a different nutrient. It all comes down to balance. See, too much potassium can actually block your trees from taking up magnesium. They're basically competing. Next up, you've got to know your soil. This is going to drive your whole strategy. In acidic soils, it's pretty straightforward, but in calcareous soils, the magnesium gets trapped, so you got to bypass the roots. Now for a really interesting trade-off. What do you need more, speed or stability? A foliar spray gives you that quick fix, but soil correction, that's for lasting, stable results. And of course, don't forget to look at the leaves. Your trees will literally tell you what's wrong.
And this brings us to what is probably the most important rule of thumb of all. Don't just add magnesium for the heck of it. In a lot of situations, your soil and your water might already have plenty. This is a targeted treatment. You only act when you have proof, either from a soil test or from seeing those very clear visual symptoms we just talked about.
Up to this point, we have focused on the macronutrients nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and magnesium, which are required in relatively large amounts and form the structural and physiological basis of peach and nectarine nutrition. However, even when macronutrients are well managed, nutritional problems can still appear if certain elements are missing in very small quantities. This brings us to the micronutrients or trace elements. Although they are needed in much lower amounts, micronutrients play a critical role in key metabolic processes, including flowering, fruit set, hormone synthesis, and enzyme activity. In many cases, yield or fruit quality limitations are not due to NPK or calcium, but to hidden deficiencies of elements such as zinc, boron, manganese, or iron. In the next section, we'll focus on how to identify micronutrient deficiencies and how to manage them efficiently in peach and nectarine orchards.
All right, let's dig into a problem that, let's be honest, can be super frustrating for peach and nectarine growers. How in the world do you feed your trees when the soil itself seems to be working against you, locking away all the good stuff? Well, today, we're going to show you exactly how to master micronutrient fertilization, even in those really challenging soils. You've probably seen this before, right? You walk through your orchard and you see these yellow leaves, maybe some stunted growth. And it's just a frustrating sight. It's a classic sign of what you could call a hidden hunger. Your trees are literally trying to tell you they need help. And in this explainer, we're going to translate that message for you. Okay, so here's the game plan. We'll start by figuring out the real root cause of this hidden hunger. Then we're going to tackle the specific strategy for iron, which is kind of in a class of its own. After that, we'll cover a trio of other key nutrients, zinc, manganese, and boron. We'll break down exactly why our approach works, and then we'll wrap it all up with a super practical field guide you can start using right away.
So let's get right to the root of the problem. Literally. Now here's the surprising part. Your soil is most likely full of the nutrients your trees need. I know, it sounds crazy. The issue isn't a lack of food, it's that there's a gatekeeper that's stopping the trees from actually getting to it.
So let's meet the main antagonist in our story here. It's something called calcareous soil. And if you're growing in places like the Mediterranean, parts of California, or Morocco, chances are you're dealing with it. Put simply, it's soil that has a high pH and a ton of calcium carbonate, and that combination basically acts like a chemical lockbox for all the good stuff.
This right here, this comparison really gets to the heart of it. On the left, in healthy, more acidic soil, all those nutrients are basically a free buffet for the roots. But on the right, in our calcareous soil, those exact same nutrients get chemically locked up. The roots are blocked. The food is right there, but the tree just can't eat. And this is exactly why how you fertilize becomes so much more important than just what you put in the ground.
First up, let's talk about the most common deficiency you're going to see, iron. It's the classic cause of those yellow leaves with the nice green veins. And for this particular problem, we're actually going to fight it right there in the soil. Iron chlorosis is incredibly common in these high pH soils for sure. You'll spot it as this really distinct yellowing between the veins. And pay attention because it usually shows up on the new young leaves first. If you let it go, it's going to slow down your shoot growth and yeah, it'll eventually hit your yield.
And it's not just about pretty leaves. This deficiency will absolutely stunt the growth of your new shoots. And if you let it go, it's going to hit you where it really hurts, your yield. It's a chain reaction, and it all starts with those yellow leaves.
Here they are. These are the numbers you're shooting for. So for iron, that sweet spot, the sufficiency range, is between 80 and 160 milligrams per kilogram. You can think of these numbers as your guide, your roadmap to giving your trees that perfectly balanced diet they need.
So, the big question is, why is this happening? You might think the obvious answer is you just need more iron in your soil, but the real reason is actually a bit more complicated. And it all starts right there, under your feet.
And here's the paradox, the really interesting part. In most places, especially if you're in a region like the Mediterranean, Morocco, or California, your soil has plenty of iron. I mean, it is packed with it. The problem isn't the amount of iron, it's that the iron is chemically locked up, making it totally unavailable for your trees to actually use. So what's the key to this lock? Well, the main culprits are a high soil pH and what we call calcareous soils with a lot of calcium carbonate. These conditions create something called bicarbonates, and they basically act like a roadblock, stopping the tree's roots from absorbing the iron that's sitting right there. It's exactly like having a pantry full of food, but the door's locked shut.
Okay, so we've identified the problem. We know the root cause. Now for the most important part, the solution. Let's talk about the right way to fertilize, to finally unlock that iron for your trees.
Now, a lot of people's first instinct is to just spray some iron directly on the leaves. And yeah, you might see them green up a little bit for a little while. But that's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. Foliar sprays are a temporary, unreliable fix because they do absolutely nothing about the real problem in the soil. The real, long-term effective solution is applying it to the soil. So listen up, because this is the key takeaway. If you really want to solve this problem for good, you have to use a very, very specific kind of fertilizer. Not just any old iron supplement will work. It must be EDDH-lated iron, and it must be applied to the soil.
So what on earth is EDDH-chelated iron? It sounds super technical, right? But think of it this way. The EDDH agent is like a personal bodyguard for the iron molecule. It wraps around it, protecting it from getting locked up by that high pH and all the calcium in the soil. This bodyguard keeps the iron soluble and ready for the tree's roots to easily grab.
And this is exactly why EDDA is the gold standard. It's literally engineered to work in those tough soil conditions we were just talking about. It stays stable even in high pH soils, it doesn't get tied up by calcium, and because of that, the roots can finally absorb it. It is the key that unlocks that pantry door.
All right, enough with the science, let's get practical. It's time to build your action plan. I'm going to give you the exact steps you need to take to apply this stuff correctly and see real results in your orchard. It really just comes down to these 4 simple steps. 1. Make sure the product you buy actually says EDHA chelated iron on it. 2. You've got to calculate the right dose. 3. Timing is everything, so get that right. And 4. Put it where the roots can actually get to it. Let's quickly break those last 3 down.
So how much do you actually need? Well, a fantastic starting point is about 10 to 15 grams of the iron product per tree. Now, you might have to adjust that up or down depending on how bad the yellowing is, but that's a great target range to aim for.
And when should you put it down? The sweet spot, the perfect window, is in early spring. You want to do it either right before or just after bud break. Applying it then means the iron is there and ready to go just when the tree needs it most for all that new growth.
And last but not least, how to apply it. If you're using drip irrigation, which is ideal, put it right in that wetted zone under the drippers where all the active feeder roots are. And here's the good news. For most situations, 1 application a year is all you need. Only in really, really severe cases would you think about splitting it into 2 smaller doses.
So, if there is one thing you remember from all this, let it be this. Stop wasting your time and money spraying the leaves. To really, truly fix iron deficiency, you have to go to the source. Fix the problem at the root, in the soil, with the right tool for the job. Soil-applied EDDHA chelated iron.
Okay, so that's our plan for iron, but for our next group of nutrients, zinc, manganese, and boron, we're going to do a complete 180. We're going to flip the strategy entirely. Instead of trying to fight the soil, we are going to bypass it altogether.
First up in the trio is zinc. If you start seeing these tiny, narrow leaves all bunched up together in what they call a rosette pattern, that's because the space between the leaves is so short, you are almost certainly looking at a zinc deficiency. And this directly impacts the growth of the fruiting wood you need for next year's crop.
And this, right here, is probably the most important thing you'll hear today. You could dump bags and bags of fertilizer onto this kind of soil, but you're not fixing the problem. You're just stuffing more food into that same locked pantry. So remember this, write it down. In these soils, it's not about what's in the soil. It's about how you get the nutrients to the tree. The delivery strategy is everything. So what's the nutrient that gets locked up the most? It's zinc. But here's the great part. Your trees will literally tell you when they're running low on it. They show these really clear signs. You just have to know what you're looking for. You have to learn to speak their language. And that language is written on the leaves. So why is zinc such a big deal? Anyway, well, you can think of it as the spark plug for the tree's engine. It's absolutely crucial for creating auxins. Those are the hormones that basically tell the tree, hey, it's time to grow. Zinc is what pushes new shoots to get longer, what helps those buds develop properly, and yeah, it's what kicks off the flowering and fruit set that we're all hoping for. You take away the zinc, and that whole system just sputters out. And these pictures show you exactly what that looks like out in the real world. The classic sign is called little leaf. And it's just what it sounds like. The new leaves are small and kind of narrow. Then the space between the leaves on a new shoot, we call those internodes, they get super short. This makes the leaves all bunched together in this tight little cluster that looks like a rose. So they call it rosetting. And here's the real kicker. This stunting means you get less fruiting wood for next year. So a zinc problem today is going to cost you fruit next season, for sure. Now, if you're the type who likes to have the hard data to back up what you're seeing, and I don't blame you, this is the number you need to know. When you send in a leaf sample for analysis, you're looking for a zinc level somewhere between 25 and 50 milligrams per kilogram. If your results come back lower than that, boom, you've got your confirmation. It's a zinc deficiency and it's time to make a plan. Okay, quick recap. We know the problem is the soil, that locked pantry, and we know how to spot the signs, right? That little leaf and rosetting. So now let's get to the good part. How do we actually fix this? How do we get that much-needed zinc out of the locked pantry and into the tree? And honestly, the answer is way simpler than you might think. You just bypass the soil entirely. Forget about it. Instead of trying to feed the roots, you feed the leaves. It's called foliar spraying, and it delivers that zinc directly onto the leaf tissue where it can be absorbed right away. It's a direct delivery. Trying to put zinc on that calcareous soil, it's just throwing your money away. The soil's going to lock it up before the roots even know it's there. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. What about fertigation? Running it through the drip lines. Well, that's a very, very limited option. It can work, but only in soils that don't have this problem in the first place. We're talking sandy soils or soils with a nice, low acidic pH. For the high pH, calcareous soils we're dealing with, nope. Foliar spraying is still the way to go. It's the gold standard for a reason. All right, so we're all on board with spraying the leaves. Awesome. But the next logical questions are, when do we spray and how much do we use? Let's get down to brass tacks and build a simple, actionable game plan you can use in your own orchard. And you're going to love this part because the schedule is so simple. You don't need some complicated calendar with 10 different applications. In most cases, all you need are just two, perfectly timed sprays. That's it. 2 sprays can be enough to fix the problem and get your trees back on track. But the timing of those 2 sprays is absolutely strategic. It's not random. The first one goes on at bud swell, right when the season is kicking off. Think of it like a shot of espresso for the tree, giving it an instant zinc boost to power all that new growth. Then the second spray happens way at the end of the season, right before the leaves fall. Now this one isn't for this year, it's for next year. You're basically loading up the branches and the trunk with zinc reserves so the tree is fully charged and ready to go next spring. And here's the last piece of the puzzle you need, the application rate. How much do you actually spray? For each of those 2 applications, you're aiming for somewhere between 1/2 and 2 kilograms of actual zinc per hectare. And a hectare, for reference, is about 2.5 acres. So there you have it. That's the specific target you need to plan your program and really see a difference.
Next up, we've got manganese. Now, its deficiency can also cause that yellowing between the veins, but you might see it on the older leaves first, sometimes with some little brown speckles. Ultimately, it just leads to an overall drop in the tree's vigor.
So what exactly is this stuff? Let's dive into the role of manganese. It's one of those things that doesn't get a lot of headlines, but it is absolutely critical. It's like the silent partner working behind the scenes, making sure everything in your tree runs smoothly. So, manganese, or Mn, is what we call a micronutrient. Now, don't let the word micro fool you. That just means the tree only needs a tiny little bit of it. But the job it does? Oh, its role is absolutely massive. It punches way above its weight class. And what are those big jobs? Well, think about the most basic, fundamental things a tree does. Photosynthesis? Turning sunlight into energy? Manganese is a key player. How about using the nitrogen you apply? Manganese is crucial for nitrogen metabolism. Without it, that expensive fertilizer just isn't getting used properly. And it activates enzymes. You can think of enzymes as these tiny little workers inside the plant. Manganese is the foreman, telling them to get to work. Without it, everything just grinds to a halt. Now here's the kicker, and this is so important. The problem usually isn't that you don't have manganese in your soil. You probably have plenty. The real challenge, especially if you're in a place with high pH, calcareous soils, like what you find in the Mediterranean or parts of California, is that the soil chemistry literally locks it up. It's like the manganese is in a vault and the tree's roots have the key, but they just can't turn the lock. So if the soil is holding the manganese hostage, how can you tell if your trees are in trouble? Well, the good news is they'll give you some pretty clear signals. You just need to learn how to read the signs. And believe me, the whole story is written right there on the leaves. So here's what you're looking for. The classic #1 sign is called intervenal chlorosis. Just picture a leaf, the veins stay nice and green, but all the tissue in between them starts to turn yellow. It's a really distinct pattern. You might also see some little brown spots, and this usually shows up on the older leaves first. And, big picture, the tree just looks tired. It doesn't have that pop, that vigor it should.
Now, if you want to stop guessing and get really precise, this is the number you need to know. A proper leaf analysis should come back with manganese levels between 40 and 80 milligrams per kilogram. If you're in that sweet spot, you're golden. Your tree has what it needs.
Okay, so you've seen the yellowing leaves, you've confirmed you have a problem. Now what? Well, the fix is actually pretty straightforward. But, and this is a big but, this is a precision remedy. This is not a situation where you just throw fertilizer out there and hope for the best.
This right here, this is the golden rule. You have to treat manganese like a prescription. You only apply it when you've confirmed there's a problem, either by seeing those symptoms we just talked about or by getting that leaf test back. Applying it just because is a waste of time and money, and it can even cause other nutrient imbalances.
So how do we get this prescription to the tree? Well, for those of us with those high pH soils that lock everything up, foliar application is hands down the way to go. Think of it like giving the tree a direct IV drip. You're spraying it right on the leaves, completely bypassing that problematic soil. The tree absorbs it instantly. Now, fertigation, that's really only a good option if you have sandy, more acidic soil where that lockup isn't a problem. All right, we've decided we're going to use a foliar spray. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty, your action plan. We're talking exact numbers and, just as important, the perfect timing to get the job done right. Here's your dosage. For each spray, you're going to aim for a rate of 0.5 to 1.5 kilograms of actual manganese per hectare. Getting this rate right is the key to fixing the problem without going overboard. And remember, this is rarely a one-shot deal. A single spray might green things up for a bit, but to really correct a deficiency, you need to plan on hitting it 2, maybe 3 times over the course of the growing season.
Timing is everything. You want to give the tree this nutrient right when it's working its hardest. So just remember the 2 E's for manganese. Your first spray goes on during early leaf expansion, as those new leaves are coming out, and your follow-up sprays happen during early fruit growth. Hitting these 2 windows means the tree can use that manganese right away to build a healthy canopy and set a good crop.
So let's just boil this all down into a super simple plan. Step 1, confirm you have a problem. Don't guess, look for the signs or get a test. Step 2, choose your method. For most of us, that's going to be a foliar spray. And step 3, time it right. Hit those 2 E windows we just talked about. Simple as that.
And finally, we have boron. A deficiency here strikes right at the heart of your crop.
So let's kick things off with the star of our show, boron. Now it's called a micronutrient, right? Which means your trees only need it in tiny amounts. But don't let that fool you. When it comes to your yield and your profits, boron's impact is anything but micro. It's huge.
And this right here is why it matters so much. This is the nuts and bolts of it. Boron is directly involved in flower fertility and pollen tube growth. The very things that lead to a successful fruit set. But it doesn't stop there. It's also a key player in building strong cell walls. And what does that mean for you? Better quality fruit that looks great and holds up.
So, what's the magic number we're aiming for? Well, when you get a leaf analysis done, you're looking for a boron concentration somewhere between 25 and 50 milligrams per kilogram. You can think of this as the Goldilocks zone, not too little and definitely not too much. If you're below this, you start seeing problems, but if you go above it, you risk toxicity, which can be just as bad. It's a real balancing act.
Okay, but here's the twist. Even if your soil test says you have plenty of boron, your trees might be completely starved of it. How is that possible? Well, it all comes down to a really common soil type that can be a massive headache for growers, calcareous soil.
So what in the world is calcareous soil? In a nutshell, it's soil with a high pH and a lot of lime. If you're growing in places like the Mediterranean, parts of California, or Morocco, this probably sounds pretty familiar. And here's the problem. That high pH basically locks up micronutrients like boron, making it totally unavailable for the tree's roots to absorb. And this is the key takeaway right here. You could have tons of boron on your soil, but if your trees can't get to it, it might as well not be there. This is why your application strategy becomes absolutely critical. It's not about how much boron is in the ground, it's all about how you get it to the tree.
So what happens when your trees are screaming for boron but can't get it? You'll start to see some very clear telltale signs. As we go through these next few slides, think about your own orchard. Do any of these red flags look familiar?
It's a direct question, I know, but it's one we have to ask. Spotting these signs early can honestly be the difference between a great profitable season and a really disappointing one.
The first and frankly most costly sign of a boron deficiency is poor fruit set. You get this absolutely beautiful bloom. The whole orchard looks amazing, but then the flowers just drop. They don't develop into fruit. This goes right back to what we said earlier. Without enough boron, those flowers just aren't fertile.
And it's not just about the number of fruit, it's about the quality too. Even if you do get some fruit to set, a boron deficiency can lead to misshapen, bumpy, or even hollow fruit, basically fruit you can't sell. Why? Because boron is essential for building those strong cell walls that give the fruit its shape and structure. Now, a boron deficiency doesn't just hurt this year's harvest, it can actually damage the long-term health of your trees. You'll often see the dieback of new, young shoots. That's a clear sign the tree is under serious stress. This can cripple its ability to produce fruit for years to come, so it's a problem you've got to get on top of fast. Now, before we jump into the solution, I have to stress this point. This is so important. With boron, more is not better. There is an incredibly narrow window between what the tree needs and what will harm it. You have to be precise. Overdoing it can cause just as much damage as not doing enough.
So how in the world do you get boron into your trees when the soil itself is working against you? Simple. You go around it. You bypass the soil completely. The answer is what we call the foliar fix, applying it directly to the leaves.
Look, when you're dealing with calcareous soil, foliar sprays are the only game in town. It's really that simple. By spraying boron right onto the leaves, you're giving the tree a direct shot of what it needs, no soil interference. Trying to apply it through irrigation or fertigation is just not going to work in these conditions. That method is really only for sandy, acidic soils with low lime.
So what does this look like in the real world? It's actually a pretty straightforward three-step playbook. Step 1. You'll apply between 0.2 and 0.5 kilograms of boron per hectare. Step 2. You're going to do this 2 to 3 times a year. And step 3, remember, always as a foliar spray. That's it.
All right, we know what to apply and how to apply it. But there's one last crucial piece to this puzzle: when to apply it. Believe me, the timing of your foliar sprays is just as important as the spray itself if you want to get the best possible results.
This timeline lays it out perfectly. There are 3 key windows for your boron application. The first is at bud break, which gives the tree a nice little kickstart for that early growth. The second, and this is probably the most critical one, is during bloom. This is your best shot to maximize flower fertility and get a great fruit set. And finally, you'll do one post-harvest, just before the leaves drop, to help the tree build up its reserves for next year.
All right, let's just quickly recap the most important points. 1. Boron is absolutely vital for your flowers and fruit. 2. If you have calcareous soil, it's probably blocking boron from getting to your trees. 3. Keep an eye out for poor fruit set and shoot dieback. 4. The only reliable fix is a foliar spray. 5. Be precise. That margin for error is tiny. And 6. Time those sprays to get the biggest bang for your buck.
So we've laid out 2 very different strategies. Treat the soil for iron and feed the leaves for our trio. But why? Why does spraying the leaves work so well for zinc, manganese, and boron?
It's actually genius in its simplicity. When you do a foliar feed, you spray the nutrient solution directly onto the leaves. The leaves act like sponges and absorb the nutrients right away. And just like that, you've completely bypassed that chemical lockbox in the soil. It's like giving the tree a direct IV drip of exactly what it needs, right when and where it needs it. It's just a smarter way to work. Wow, we have covered a ton of ground. We've talked about the problem, the specific nutrients, and the different strategies. So now, let's boil it all down into one simple, powerful tool that you can actually take out into the orchard with you. And here it is. Think of this as your ultimate cheat sheet for a successful season. For iron, you're looking for those yellow young leaves with green veins, and you treat it with a soil application in early spring. For zinc, watch for that little leaf look and hit it with a foliar spray at bud swell and post-harvest. For manganese, if you see chlorosis on the older leaves, use a foliar spray, but only if needed. And finally, for boron, to avoid poor fruit set, use a very careful foliar spray around bloom time and again after harvest. This chart right here is your key.
In this second part, we focused on the practical fertilization of calcium, magnesium, and micronutrients in peach and nectarine orchards, emphasizing their key role in fruit firmness, leaf efficiency, physiological balance, and overall fruit quality. We saw that, unlike macronutrients, these elements are often related to quality tree health and hidden deficiencies, and therefore require precise diagnosis based on leaf analysis, soil conditions, and orchard performance. Together with the macronutrients discussed in Part 1, these nutrients form a complete and balanced fertilization strategy, adapted not only to yield targets but also to long-term orchard sustainability and fruit market requirements. In the next video, we will move from theory to practice through real case studies of peach and nectarine fertilization in major production regions, including Morocco, California, and Spain, to highlight how fertilization programs must be adapted to different soils, climates, and production systems. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave your questions or comments below. I'll be happy to answer all your questions related to peach and nectarine fertilization and help you adapt these recommendations to your own orchard conditions.